Yeah.
Different trees. Richard described it, it's like, that one is yeah. I just want to make sure that you are and structure and commitment. Things one, people and I know that your stuff. So if you need someone like me, you just structure it something. You just go for it. And you do it. But that's what you've got in many. You're yourself. Yes, I guess.
This is on.
Yeah. Yeah, we got to the guy in this one, working on North Park. But we on the top of that, you should take the lead on it.
I'm saying I can't hear you.
Yeah, so.
That's why I thought it could, because he was.
That one is so.
Would you rather I use that?
You can, you both could still be able to.
Oh, and they won't interfere?
No, they want to. So that's what you can say that I might not want the bell.
Can I move this just out a little bit?
Yes.
Do you mind if I just want to slide it forward. I'll keep going. What further? Yeah, that's where I want to be. Off to the side a little bit further. So that I'm not standing, I don't want that light on my forehead.
Oh, gotcha.
This way? Is this better?
Yep, you should be able to be right there.
And if I stand here, see, I want to walk around. If you want me to stand here, I don't need this then, do I?
You'll need them both.
Oh, I will.
Yeah, they won't be able to hear you in the back.
Okay, this doesn't go to that.
Nope, this goes to the remote table. Just repeat the questions and we should be good.
Yeah, is that close enough to me?
I think you'll be fine.
I'll turn it on and see. Test.
Yep.
You're good. Should this be turned off? This one's still live. Okay, how do I go forward on this?
So you're going to be able to press that button forward, that button back.
Is it loud now?
It should be.
There we go.
Yeah, that was our freshman. I think a lot of it.
Okay, we ready to get started? So for the sake of full disclosure, I've never worked at Medrad, McKesson, or Phillips. But that's where Julie learned her craft, grew her experiences, and learned her lessons. Julie and I have known each other for about a year, which means we have an anniversary coming up.
Yeah.
But there's not going to be cake, I can tell you that. However, if there's something that I ever needed to know about a medical device, the regulatory process, the device itself, the market for that device, it's really nice to have a Julie to go to get those answers. She is one hell of a resource, and I'm happy that she's in my life. No further ado, it gives me great pleasure to introduce my friend, Julie Gulick.
I'm going to have this here. Can you hear me? Okay, let's make sure that you guys can hear me. And I have to stay next to this one. So I'm going to stay a little planted today. I'm a walker usually, but I'm going to stand here today. Thank you so much, Brett, for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I've learned so much about BatDoc only in the last few months as we've been preparing for this little conference we have here. And I think it's an amazing concept, an amazing product. But I'm not from the military. I know very little about the military. I do have an ex-husband that was a Marine, but I don't think that counts anymore. And I grew up watching MASH. So that gives me some kind of insight into this. And I mean that with all respect. I'm not here to talk to you about BatDoc. I'm not here to talk to you about the military or anything like that. As Brett said, I'm from a background of medical device development. So oh, no, thank you. So my background is actually a technical background. I'm an engineer. I'm a Penn Stater. I'm sorry for those that don't like me from Pitt, but I did go to Pitt as well, and I got an MBA. I actually started my career working in manufacturing engineering of ultrasonic transducers. I then went into radiology. So that's CT scans, MR scans, cardiac cath lab. Then I went into the pharmacy, and then I went into sleep. So I've been kind of all over the healthcare system in my career. I then went and worked in a corporate role at Philips and ran an accelerator for about 3 years. So I got to experience the startup world in the Boston area, which I can tell you is a little different than what's going on here in Pittsburgh. It is so much faster and so much more competitive. And I'm trying to bring that here to Pittsburgh. So we're also starting a venture studio. Now I run an industrial design company. So I was a client of Bally Design for about 20 years, and now I'm the CEO. And it's a lot of fun to see all of the different products that come to market. There's a lot of similarities in, I'm just going to go back to the title slide. My talk for you today is about moving your medical device from concept to commercialization. Okay. And when I was thinking about this, I think it's really interesting that the comments that just were, the discussion that was just had really has set me up well. But when I was putting this together, I was thinking about it from having a product and moving it into the military, not putting a product together and moving it into a civilian application. But there aren't many differences in that. I think from the perspective of the bigger market, I want to start where it's quote unquote easier, still not easy, but it's easier. And what I want to share with you all today is from two different perspectives. One of them is for people that don't know medical device development. The other one is if you do know medical device development. So we're going to start with a few basics, and then we're going to go into some very specific things. Maybe this applies to you, maybe it doesn't. Maybe you're from the military kind of perspective, or from wherever you are. Consider what we're putting out there and see if there are things that you can take from it and apply to what you're trying to do. And I'd love to take questions along the way. We're going to go through just a series of topics. And if you have questions, let me know. We have plenty of time. I'll repeat the question and then we'll have a discussion. Okay. So the first one is, let's start with acronyms. So there are a lot of similarities between medical device and military. We both like acronyms. We both like process. And we both like regulations. That's going to be an easy translation. If you have people that work in a regulated environment, no matter what that environment is, it's easy to translate into the other ones. Military, medical device, safety, like trains or hard hats or firefighting equipment, and nuclear. There's a lot of this all in Pittsburgh, and a lot of the engineers move between all of these companies. And it's because we all speak a similar language. QMS is the first acronym that I'm going to use, Quality Management System. So when you're building a medical device, you need to be under what's called a quality management system. And one of the questions that I get, or worse, I don't get because people don't even know to ask the question, is when should I be under a quality management system? And the answer is a resounding, it depends. But here's a way to start thinking about it. If you are in a research phase, if you are quickly iterating, most people do not go under a quality management system. When you are in development, and this is a fuzzy line that goes between the two of them, you should be squarely within quality management system and a product development process. As you go into product launch and manufacturing, you definitely need to be under a quality management system. That could either be your own or your manufacturer's. By this time, you should know what you're doing. We have a lot of startups that come to our industrial design company and asking for a prototype to be built. And sometimes you're doing prototyping and you're in research. It's just a breadboard, it's mocked together with a duct tape on it. It's just being held together because you're trying to prove feasibility. You're trying to understand if your technology works, if what you're doing can be. You're not worried about scale. You're just worried about quickly iterating and learning, maybe taking it out to people to look at it, not use it on a patient necessarily, but sometimes you are, and that's a little bit different, but you are just quickly iterating that technology. That is your research phase. This is where I think phase one SBIRs are a lot of times. Whenever you're now looking at, you should have things that are written requirements so that you know what your team is doing and you're all moving in the same direction. This is when you're clearly in the development phase. This is a very difficult concept for a lot of startups to understand. We see a lot of startups that are partway through development. They have no written requirements. They've been doing usability testing, and none of that is documented. This is a huge waste of energy and effort because you have to go back and do those things again when you could have just easily documented them as you were going along and taken credit for it whenever you do your submission to the FDA. So I bring this here, not because there's a decision or a definition that you can have, but more so that we start this conversation earlier with our startups. We don't want you to be under a QMS. I do my best to stay out of the QMS as long as I can. So as I said, I started as an engineer, but then I got an MBA and I moved into what's called upstream marketing. I am a self-confessed control freak. And instead of being the engineer that developed the product, I wanted to be the one that defined the product. I really didn't like engineering either, to be truthful, because I liked being out with clients. I wanted to see people. I wanted to know why. I always was asking the question, why are we building this way? And a lot of people couldn't answer that question. I was introduced to upstream marketing. There's a lot of different titles for those jobs, but I was able to go out, travel the world, visit people where they were using the products. For me, that was healthcare systems. I wasn't working on the battlefield. I was working in healthcare systems. And I could see what was going on and then work in a very small cross-functional team to write the marketing requirements. Marketing requirements should come before your product requirements. And when I see very small companies, people aren't aware of how to be working in this area. Your marketing requirements do not belong inside of a QMS, or early ones do not. There's always debate on whether you have to include them or not. I contend you don't put them there. That can be in your research phase, and a PRD, product requirements document, can have hundreds of lines in it. A marketing requirements document, the actual marketing requirements, might have a page or two. They're very high level. They also are called a user needs document, and you can write them as a user needs to. The user needs to accomplish this or that. This can really help your team as you're trying to figure out what your product should be and where you're going and how you're pivoting through the learnings that you have. So these are some topics that I just wanted to bring up as we're looking at new product development for medical devices, because these are the questions that I'm not hearing discussed within the Pittsburgh community as we're encountering a lot of people that are just starting to learn medical device new product development. So The product development process and the QMS go together. The quality management system, I'll show you next how these two come together. But the product development process is very, very simple at a very high level. There are usually just a few phases in it. We start with design planning. This is whenever we put together a high level plan for the entire project. Is this going to take us 18 months and 3 years or 5 years? I've been on projects that are extremely complicated with hundreds of engineers, and they're taking 3 to 5 years to launch. You've got to have a good understanding of what that is going to cost you before you're done. Next, we go into design input. These are the requirements. This is when we start putting that product requirements document together. Very new teams tend to gloss over this, especially some of the marketing people, because they think the engineers should handle that. But really what happens is if you spend the time working on those requirements early, you will control where you are going. Because you will move a little bit, the bigger the project, the more complicated it is, the better you should be looking at those, especially as the marketing person, to make sure that where you're going is the direction you want to go. You can always pivot if you're used a little bit, but a good project manager isn't going to let you move much. You are committing to these things at the beginning, and you have to live with those decisions. This is the time when you slow down to go fast. Design output is the actual engineering that's done. That's the easiest one to understand. This is code that's written, CAD that's developed, whatever that looks like. That's the biggest one and the easiest one to understand. As I talk to people, I get asked, what is V&V all the time? V&V stands for verification and validation. Verification is testing requirements to understand if you are providing what you intended to. Validation is in a broad way, is thinking about usability. Does the product do what you want it to do for the user? And so validation is a lot squishier, I would say. And we use usability testing for a lot of our validation. This testing goes on throughout the process of designing the product, because what we do is we work with parts of the product until we get to the system. So we can go out and do very quick, early, formative usability testing just to see if we're on the right track. These are where you're making big moves and big changes as you're learning from your users. As you go to your summative validation testing, it should be a check the box activity. Not because you just want to check the box, but because you've done all of your learning along the way. If you have a heart that I just need to get through this, you're really missing the spirit of what's going on here from the FDA. The FDA has learned over years and decades that stage gate is very important because that's how we build products that are safe and effective. And usability is so that the mere mortals that are using these products, not the engineers that are building them, can actually understand them. Usability is an important part of it, and sometimes it just gets relegated to as low level or low importance as people can make it. And if we turn that around and we look at it and say, okay, I'm going to have a product that is actually going to have a higher commercial success because people understand what to do. You can look at it's called the MOD database of complaints and errors, people that get hurt. Whenever you look at the MOD database for the area that you're working in, you can see how people have been harmed, either the patient or the user, by products that are very hard to understand. Sometimes you get products, I know I get products and I'm like, why can't I understand this? And it's because the usability isn't there. The number one product that we all have in our pockets is our phone. There is a ton of usability that's used on these phones to make them intuitive, that people just know where to go, or you learn one behavior and that is abstracted across other functionalities on your phone. That's millions of dollars. I love when people come to us and say, I want it to be just like an iPhone. And I'm thinking, great, do you have a multi-million-dollar budget for us to work on? Because it does take a lot of time and money and effort. That's B&B. The last one is the FDA review. This is another question mark that we have right now of as things are changing in our federal government, as things are changing in the FDA, how is the FDA review time going to change? It was last year 3 to 6 months. There's varying debate on whether that's going to increase. You have to leave time for that FDA review and still have a team that can come and tiger team any of the questions that are coming from this. I always get a lot of questions on this chart about the manufacturing. Do you start building things that early? You're not even done designing it. And you might not be building your final product, production equivalent, but you are starting to look at what is the tooling that you're going to be using? Do you have a qualified vendor? Are they ISO 13485 certified? Lots and lots of questions that are going on very early. You should pull that manufacturing very, very early, because if it's later, you're way behind the game. It wastes a lot of time and energy and effort. You have people that are designing early in this process, and if you're working with that manufacturer early, or remember, trying to find the right manufacturer that fits for what you're trying to do, you can make changes as you're going to either pick a better vendor, which is sometimes needed, or work with the vendor and change your design so that you match together and you're going to have a much better time working together. Launch planning and commercialization is the same thing. As I said, I worked in upstream marketing, but there's always a downstream marketing counterpart. That's the person that we would say years ago, put the brochures together. Now they put the website together, but they're working on the claims, and claims are very, very important for the FDA. This is what you can say about your product. The FDA is very persnickety about what you say and how you're selling your product, and they can shut you down if the claims that you're using do not match what you've given to the FDA in your submission. They must match, and that's truth in advertising. So if you say you can cure cancer, you better be able to cure cancer. And if not, you can't say it. The downstream marketing are the ones that plan all of that. They're the ones that go out and figure out where are the talks going to happen? What are the physicians that you're going to be working with? Who are your thought leaders? They can also help you with that later validation. They can get those clinical boards together so that you can talk with people and have them use your product. There's a lot of work. And interestingly, the amount of budget in that line is much, much larger than a lot of the other lines in here. They need the money so that they can get the word out. The sales force is who they talk with. Upstream talks to engineering, downstream works with the sales force. And that commercialization should go the whole way across. So some of the things we've learned along the way, especially as we've been working with startups, we see a lot of startups that never have this whole thing. They are planning a few months out. They don't realize you can sit down and plan the entire project. You don't plan the entire project in excruciating detail. You use what's called rolling wave. Anybody that has project management experience, that's where the detail is in the first few weeks that you're working towards. And the further out you get, the fuzzier it gets because you just don't know. So the value in putting all of that detail in there just isn't worth it because you'd be reworking the entire schedule the entire time. But you can use this and understand what's the amount of money that I'm going to need. $3 million, $2 million, $20 million. That's important. You would never build a house without knowing what the whole budget is. It's the same thing here. And the budget is in time, people, and dollars. Go slow to go fast. I'm also seeing a lot of people that are very anxious to get going and just to move, but they don't know where they're going. And sometimes they're just going in circles. So sometimes we need to take a pause, slow down, and do some planning, write those requirements. I see people that are like, we all know what we're doing. And I always love that. Well, we all know, we're all aligned. I said, great, let's take 10 minutes, let's write it all down. And then they see how misaligned they are. It's always wonderful just to take those little aha moments and go, ha, what was right again? But it gets them to come together. And that's where the conversation goes, where you can get people aligned and you can start getting rid of all of the wasted time and wasted energy and rework that you have to do because you're going in different directions. You want a team that is nicely organized and all moving in the same direction. Of course we do, but there's ways that you have to do that and you have to sometimes slow down. The last one is consult an expert. It was mentioned earlier. Your regulatory person is key. Pick the right one. I have worked with dozens and dozens of regulatory people over my career, and there are people, the phrase that I've loved the most is that your regulatory person should not be a police barricade. They should be a police escort. If they're telling you no, first of all, check yourself and make sure you're not the cowboy and you need to be told no. Or check that first and then say, do I have the right regulatory person? We now have a regulatory person that we're working with that it's always, I can figure out how to do that. Let's figure out a faster way to do that. That's his mantra. And I love it. And his entire team is that way. It's the ethos of the consulting firm. And it is so refreshing. The project manager, I like to think of as the train conductor. The regulatory person is putting down the rails for you so that you can just fly. If you don't have that kind of a relationship, think about a new regulatory person. The creative ones will help you go faster. They will take out barricades, and it is refreshing because no matter how much I want to spend time in the regulations, I cannot spend as much time as they do. And when you have something that's done many, many different types of products, especially you want somebody that's in your category. So if you're in implantables, they better have done implantables before. If you're in sterile disposables, they need to have done sterile disposables before. And if they've stubbed their toe and figured out ways through it, they're worth their weight in gold. So this is the product development process. Let's put that together with the quality management system. So down the left here, and this one's an eye chart, and we're not going to read the whole thing, or else we're going to spend an hour just on this. But down the left are all of the cross-functional people that you need in medical device new product development. I don't like the order because marketing is really low, makes me feel less important, should be much higher, but I can deal with it. Across the top, it's a little bit different wording, but it's that product development process. So here we start with concept, feasibility, design and planning, design execution. They break up the V&V and they put verification there. And then they have validation and transfer. So there's a transfer meeting that you need, very formal meeting, regulatory submission, then commercialization and post-market. Not that much different. So this is the part where you can see that it's very rigid. It feels very rigid. People that aren't in medical device development can also often be overwhelmed by this. But if you break it down and you think about it from the perspective of whatever your role is, you only have one line to work on. It gets a lot easier. It's a lot of planning and then execution. Slow down to go fast. The funny thing I saw on this, but there's only 2 NAs on the whole thing. Besides that, there's lots and lots and lots of documents that go on with this. It's not that hard. When you're working with people that have done this before, you work through it and it makes you go faster. You have the discipline as you begin and you gain speed as you go through the entire process. I am not going to read this. You can look at it. I'll give you a second to look at it, but there's no way that I'm going to read this. The whole point of this is that the detail needs to be there and you need to be trained on how to do this. But once that happens, it starts to unlock. And whenever you're in a group, we were just in a group last night doing some debating on this. When you have people that have been there, done that, you fly through this. You have a language, you all know where you're going. You're not trying to debate on should we have this document or shouldn't we have this document. Some of the early planning is the documents that you will have. That decreases the regulatory burden on you, the burden that comes from working within a QMS, because you're all on the same page and you're working from the same sheet of music. Okay. That's for people that have never done medical device new product development. I see a lot of heads nodding, so I can tell which of you have been there, done that, stubbed your toe, learned the lesson, got the t-shirt. For those of you that haven't done it, hopefully this is a little bit of an eye-opening experience of maybe some questions to ask, or before you try and do it on your own, try and pair up with people that have done this before. It's not that difficult if you've been there, done that. What I want to do is change topics now a little bit, and pivot just a little bit, and talk about some of the things to consider. I put together here 4 or 5 different areas that you can think about as you're trying to make that transition from a civilian product to a military product. I think this can help. Yeah. 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 So the comment was about how much money you need in the manufacturing area, and especially for those first 100 devices. We're seeing some of our products that are 10x, 30x, 40, 50x more for those 100 devices than whenever you get to 10,000 or 100,000 at a time. Also, tooling is another problem, millions of dollars. And thinking about, that's where the partnership comes in as well, where some of your manufacturers can get very creative in the kind of tooling that you're going to use. One of the biggest problems and why people want to all develop software as a medical device, because software is so much easier and cheaper and easier to change. Where whenever you're building tooling and then you take it out and you're like, huh, I need to change. That's not working. Something's wrong with this. That's why you want to spend your time taking your prototypes that might be hand carved, might be one off, might cost you $10,000 to build one prototype. Go and take that out until the thing's fallen apart. You will learn so much because you are going to spend millions of dollars on your tooling. You want to make sure it's right. Because it's also the time that it takes. You delay yourself so much. Yeah, we 3D print all the time. We 3D print and then cut things out and hand carve and glue something else back in. And it's amazing what can be done whenever you have somebody that really knows how to build prototypes. We have prototypes that we're always Frankensteining, cutting off this ear and putting on a nose over here, just rebuilding it, or also building 15 different. One of the philosophies of prototyping is you only put the detail in the area that you're trying to answer a question. You have to know the question you're trying to answer. We've built OXO products, kitchen devices. We've done over 100 of them with OXO. And there's one in our prototype lab that we show where there's 15 types of handles. So there's nothing on the front. There's just a placeholder. It's a beater. Hold it like this, and there's little beaters that go around. We're only working on the handle. So the bottom has just a blank in it, and they're all the same. And then the handles at the top are all different. And they're hand carved. So very easily, we could just put these in front of a bunch of different people and figure out what they like and what they don't like without even really asking them, tell me what you think. What are your first impressions? And you get to experience it instead of having them say, that one looks best for me. They actually get to use it. And if anybody wants to tour our studio anytime, we have lots of prototypes that show that you'll see one area that's very detailed because we understand the questions we're trying to answer. And so that's working from a risk perspective. This is our risk. This is what we're trying to learn. You want to prototype that way all along, and you want to go out and work with people. Thank you for the comment. Okay, so I'm going to show you a few tools that we use that have been developed over the last 10 years or so. I did not develop this. This is the business model canvas. Who here knows the business model canvas? Some of you, not all of you. This is actually built by Strategizer. So this is an industrial designer, did his PhD to develop this thing, which I think is kind of cool. We're not going to learn the whole business model canvas right now. This is a shorthand for how you're going to make money. Okay, I'll show you 3 areas on it. The middle one is called the value proposition. And there is a Mad Lib. You know what a Mad Lib is? There's words and then blanks, and you have to fill it in, but you actually get to look at it while you're doing it. It's not a game. That's your value proposition. Our blank, our ventilator helps military people on the battlefield to do what? You fill in those blanks. So it's a real shorthand. That sounds very easy to write, but when you're very early, it's very difficult. And you will write it many, many, many times and hone it as you're learning. That's the center section. Off to the right is the customer segment. Okay, we're selling this to healthcare systems with 800 beds or more, or whatever that may be. And at the bottom, this area is the channel. How are you selling it? A direct sales force, through the military, through a distributor, whatever that looks like. Okay, so the reason why I show this is that you can fill these out for many, many different things. Okay, I'm going to show you a value proposition roadmap. Okay, we developed this when I was at Philips because we had two different organizations that could not communicate. Philips, whenever you're doing a new product development, has minimum revenue targets that are massive over 5 years. This comes from Lean Startup, which tells you you need to do something very, very small, an MVP or a minimum value proposition. I have a lot more acronyms in this than I realized. And a minimum value proposition, minimum viable proposition. Sorry. So that means it has to be as small as you can make it. Viable means you have to make money on it, a proposition, a product. And what we also found, so we have the little guy and the big guy. So the little one we're going to call an MVP. But what we decided to do was to bridge that gap between these two competing efforts to find a very small beachhead that you can work your way into to something that is going to make hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue over 5 years. So let's bridge that together. So we put this roadmap together where we're going to look at two axes. Complexity is here. Complexity of what? Complexity of data, complexity of the user, complexity of the product. Any of it's fair game. And along the bottom is time. There are no increments in time. If you use this, and I hope you do, I caution you, do not put increments here. Because if you're pitching with this, people will hold you to those times. It could be months, it could be years, it could be many different things. And whatever you put there, I can tell you right now, you're going to be wrong. And you don't want to be held to that. It is an evolution. And it's easier to arrange it because sometimes the steps are very big that you're going to need to take, and sometimes they're very small. You just don't want to get into that. Just put them so that it looks pretty. So what we're going to do is start with the MVP. Go as small as you can and then go smaller. I've learned this of talking to hundreds, if not thousands of people. Whatever you think your MVP is, go smaller and then take it out to people. If you are larger than you need to be, no one will tell you. Ever. They think, oh, Joe down the street must need that. I'll never use that. But they're not going to tell you that because you aren't going to ask that usually. Go smaller, and then you hear, I'll never use that. Oh, why? Well, it's missing this, and this. So what you thought your MVP was this big, you've just taken it out at this big, and now you've heard what they really need, and you go up to here. You end up with an MVP that is much smaller, and you can get to market faster. What you do with those things that everybody's nervous about that you're letting go is you put them in what's called your MVP plus. That's your next release, whenever that is. But it's a very quick next release. So the way that we go after that is we would sit down and do a workshop, and we would talk about all the ways that our technology could be manifested. And we would brainstorm value propositions that were, 50 of them, 100 of them, coalesce them all, get rid of all the duplicates, put some things together, and then come up with maybe 20 if you're working on a very big portfolio. For a startup, you might have 4 or 5. This is also a very good slide to have in your back pocket because sometimes you're looked at and they say, you need to be more focused. You get more focused, and then they say, you're a one-trick pony. And you just don't know who you're talking to at any one time. So you put this slide or something like it in your back pocket. Back in your appendix. You have to be careful though, because this is your company's strategy. You may not want everybody to know what this is. But what you do is you take those value propositions and you start by looking at where your North Star is. So your North Star is where your aspirations are. This is where we want to be. And you arrange everything either from the MVP up to the North Star or from the North Star back. People think in different ways. Some people do future casting, some people do back casting. It's like bottoms up or top down. It's exact same thing. And different people in the group will need different parts of this. So just be aware of that. And you arrange what you have. Okay. So why is this interesting? It's just what you're going to build. Because what you can also do is this doesn't need to be a straight line. Sometimes what we do is say, I have this product, I'm going to add these features, then these features, then these features. And really, I'm not changing much at all in terms of my channel or my geography. It's like I'm starting in the United States and I'm adding a few more things and a few more things and a few more things. But what if we take a detour in here and we decide we're going to change geographies and we put some value propositions in there? For instance, I worked in molecular imaging for a while. We worked on an injector that's using PET scanning. This is used for oncology, for cancer staging. You're injected with a called FDG, with a radioactive product, pharmaceutical, and it has a sugar in it. Wherever the cancer is highly metabolic, meaning it takes up more sugar. So you get glowing spots where cancer is. So if anybody has ever had a loved one or somebody that you know, where they say there's hot spots, that's what they're talking about. So if you have pancreatic cancer, it's now in your lungs or in your brain, they can see the hot spots in the different places. Well, that was fine and dandy. We released that in the United States. We went to release it in Europe, and the products that they take the FDG out of, totally different shape. And we're talking about milliliters that you're trying to dose to people, and it's constantly decaying. So the volume changes over time as it's decaying. It's not an easy way to dose. And what we were doing is changing from a standard dose to weight-based dosing and time-based dosing all at the same time. So it was a lot of fun. But all of the vessels were different sizes, so we had to do something very different. That new product development was a big leap for us. Something like this. You can have another one, and maybe this is your military application. Okay, so I put all of this together to help you guys think about how to frame where you're going. I'm used to starting, as I said, from civilian applications and later to a military application. You can use this the other way around. I'm getting my SBIR, my STTR, I'm working with BATDOC. I have this military application. It's not sustainable. My market isn't big enough for the long run. I've seen some of these where when I was at Philips, we did a battlefield ventilator. It was hundreds of millions of dollars. I don't know, it was a boatload of money. But we had to then say, how can we make this into a civilian application? This was right before COVID too, which is interesting. But having some of that plan, this is a methodology and a framework for you to start putting some of that together. I find that people either have all these ideas and they want to do everything at once and they can't get their focus on the MVP, or they don't have anything past the MVP. And it takes care of both of those. It can help you put them together. Because what you also do when you put this MVP 1, 2, 3, ... Well, I can't do 3 because I don't have 2. Oh, wait, these have to change change order that they're in. Those are the things that you're looking for. Sometimes these have 4 or 5 value propositions on them. Like I said, sometimes they can have 20 or 30. As you're making this transition, the next one is, who is your user? I have other, but whenever we look at the user, or human-centered design on medical devices, it is the most complicated perspective. When you're doing a consumer product of a beater in your kitchen, there's one. That person probably has a need, goes and looks for it, buys it, and uses it. They're all of these things. When you get into medical devices, those of you who have done this, you know this is so much more complicated. The nurse that uses it is not the person that wants it, the doctor that wants it to be used, nor the person that purchases it, nor the biomed that has to bring it in and test it. It just goes on and on and on. So if you're using a product and you're now going to have a new application, one of the first things that I recommend you do is do an exercise like this. What is changing and what is staying the same? If you don't know this, one of the things that Jan was just saying is you have to have somebody in the military that can help you understand all of these differences, because you may still have different people, but they may have different titles, they may work in different ways, and you have to go out and understand what that's all about. So that's the first part of this. The second one is the intended use and indications for use. So start with some definitions, because most people have these together. These are both required in medical devices. The top one is the intended use. It's what it does. A subset of that is the indications for use, which is the who, the when, and the why it is used. Okay? Intended use, upper level, indications for use, lower level. Let's look at an example. So I looked up some examples for this, looking at changes in these two when you go from a civilian application to a military application. So this is a very simple one, where our intended use for a handheld wound irrigation device. It's very simple. A device is intended to deliver a pressurized stream of sterile saline to cleanse wounds. The indications for use indicated in healthcare settings, hint that will change, right? We're going to go into a military to irrigate acute and chronic wounds, including lacerations, abrasions, and surgical incisions. Now let's look at the battlefield adaptation. Intended to deliver a pressurized stream of sterile or potable water, it's already changing, or saline to cleanse traumatic wounds in emergency or austere environments. So writing these is once again where you come back with your regulatory person. You're working with people that are in the know of that environment. You don't sit in a vacuum and just figure this out. You go and you talk to people and understand what's going on and what is different and what are the implications to your regulatory pathway. Sometimes you can write things that have huge implications, and your regulatory engineer is going to help you through that and say, if this word changes to that, it's much simpler. If that word changes to that, you're now a class 3 device, or you're going to clinical trials, or you're de novo. But this way, we can get it through in a 510K. That's the marriage that you want to have with that regulatory engineer. At the bottom, indicated for use by military personnel or first responders. Very different education level than that position. This is saying in healthcare settings, but this can be very, very different. And the place is in battlefield or mass casualty settings. So they've also done some civilian and military applications with that mass casualty. But that was very interesting. To irrigate traumatic wounds, including penetrating injuries, burns, and blast-related lacerations. A lot of these things we wouldn't expect to necessarily see in the healthcare setting. Here's a summary of the key differences. The environment changed. The operator changed. The wound type changed. And the fluid source changed. These are things you need to be thinking about, and your engineers need to be reading about and learning about as they're developing the product. It might have implications on what they're doing and how they're developing the product. Okay? So that's why I thought, just by work, this is one of the things that's required in or should be in your marketing requirements document, is your intended use and your indications for use. Ruggedness. The thing has to last. You are not in a simple hospital where you move things from a shelf to use or from a loading dock to a shelf to another shelf to use. That's a very nice place to be using things. On the battlefield, we all know it's nothing like that. So I looked up another product. This is not a product that we've developed either. And I had no idea what this thing was. And the more I read about it, it's like, wow, never want to see one of these ever. Intraosseous, so osseous is bone, infusion system. This is a product with some prongs on it that they jam into your sternum to give you fluids. So a sternal intraosseous infusion system designed to deliver emergency fluids or medications directly into the bone marrow when intravenous access is difficult or impossible. Sounds like a bad situation. Huh? It's going to hurt. I'm thinking you're not awake for this. Oh, really? On somebody conscious? The comment was there's a good video of somebody a Marine doing this to another Marine for practice. Oh, wow. I'm kind of glad I didn't see that one. This is a hospital use, though, which is interesting. So this probably is somebody that's in pretty bad shape, maybe mass casualty. They're trying to move quickly. They can't get a vein open. This person is not going to be surviving, is what I'm thinking. This is not just a simple thing to be doing. So design characteristics: single-use disposables, sterile packaging, minimal training. This is going on quick. Something's going on around this, and these are decisions that are being made quickly. Now let's look at this on the battlefield. This product underwent ruggedization. I usually think of ruggedization like putting a case around it. I thought this one was so much more interesting. So they changed the packaging when they switched from vacuum sealed, switched to vacuum sealed durable foil pouches for compact storage and water resistance. Materials were reinforced to withstand extreme temperatures, dust, moisture, and rough handling. Can you imagine if you got this thing and it's in a package and it's half open and now you're gonna jam this into your buddy and he's gonna survive what's going on, but he's gonna die of an infection later. That's not what you want to have happen. Modified for one-handed application. This is going on with more people than just the one you're dealing with. You don't have more people coming around you. You know, I think of the episodes of MASH when they looked out and triage was just overwhelming. That's what I was thinking of when I was reading this. One-handed application or use under stress with color-coded guides for fast deployment. I was in the emergency department and it was interesting to watch. I was there for a few hours. I was there with my mom and she's fine. Thanks for asking. And I was bored. So I sat there. She wasn't that sick. So she was getting fluids and she was doing fine. So I watched process. I was being a systems engineer and watching how everybody moved around. And we actually got not a room, but we were in a hallway. So I saw everything coming and going. And I found it fascinating. You know, strange things that we all think about, but how they had tiger teams and tiger teams came and worked on people. Somebody came in with a gunshot wound. They knew they were coming. There were 5 or 7 people in one little room as soon as they got there, and they just kept being deployed. And she just needed IV fluid, and we hardly saw anybody, which was fine. We got exactly what we needed, but those people were moving around. Whenever this is being used, I think it's everybody's all hands on deck, and still you can't get to everybody. It's a very different use case. Your usability testing is very different. Your design is very different. How you think about it is very different. That's my point to all of this. As you are moving your product from civilian to military or military to civilian, you need to think about these things. Because if you're starting in civilian, you're wasting money on your COGS as you have the civilian one, or you're going to have a product that doesn't work whenever you have the military one. And the military people are going to look at it and they're going to say, I'm not touching that thing. It's the same thing when you're working in healthcare systems and you don't ask the nurse that's going to use it, because she probably is not going to buy it. And a lot of people will overlook her. But if you make her job worse, she will hide it, make sure the batteries don't work, or do everything in her power to get your product out away from her because you're wasting her time. Don't forget that. And the same thing's going on here in the military. People will get rid of your product. They won't use it. The benefits of the battlefield version. It is able to be used in a much faster and easier way, even in this rugged environment. That's all I have. So I hope what I've done is giving you an idea of how to think about your product as you move. So first of all, if you haven't worked in medical device, get some people around you that have. It can be intimidating. It can be overwhelming. Don't wait too long. Get some people around you that can say, nope, you're good. Keep going. Don't get into a QMS. And that can help you once you are ready to get into a QMS. If you're already into product development process, QMS, and you know that, and you're trying to move this switch from civilian to military or military to civilian, think about some of the different tools that I've given here, and I hope that they can help you. Thanks so much. Any questions? Thanks.